probably 30 feet higher than their kind of property roof already. So right now, this is the photo was taken from our main living area. You can see this used to be a window which can capture the light and the scenic white dust, but now it's just only a very solid grain of wall. Walls of grains, yeah. So this is the one issue. And also our previous owner actually tried to negotiate with the neighbor, try to solve this issue, but the neighbor refused to do anything about it. And I think this is not just a personal frustration, but also affect the value of our home, as others said, and also the quality of the lives we received, and also the enjoyment of our property also got impacted. So one more thing I want to show here is this is a photo I took from our deck. So you can see on the right side there also a small right now it's not that tall, but there's another line of tree actually they planted later on. This tree right now is already kind of get to the height of our deck, and after a couple of years, then the whole our whole house will be enclosed by those wall of trees. That is makes the overall living quality and also the value of the property will be kind of impacted so much. But this is why I'm kind of here also want to see how our city can take some action, and we need some reasonable regulation to prevent this situation. And where one property owner action or inaction cause significant harm to the other neighbors, I believe if we have some good regulation and
20 seconds.
Yeah, should promote the fairness and encourage better neighborhood relationship, and providing a clear guidance for all of us to follow. Yeah. Anyway, this is just something actually I want to quickly show, and I really hope that the city can consider and adopt the ordinance similar to the Yarrow Point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving John Darvish over now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, very good. Hi, dear commissioners. My name is John Darvish, and I'm a resident of Mercer Island. We purchased our home in May of 2021. When we previewed the home, it had a lovely view of Lake Washington. It was one of the selling points for us. It took us close to 19 months before we moved in due to some improvements that we were doing to the house. By the time that we moved in, the view of the lake had substantially disappeared. When we approached our neighbor, they were unsympathetic and quite focused on blocking their unseemly view of our other neighbor, which was common neighbor for both of us. When we suggested to trim the hedge at our cost, yet they did, but yet protect their privacy, they refused, and they were curt and short. It was not the neighborly response that we had expected. We are asking the commission to force reasonable trimming of hedges where the views of the neighbors is blocked by unreasonable entitlement. Mercer Island enjoys beautiful scenery of Mount Rainier, Lake Washington, downtown Bellevue, downtown Seattle, etc. We can make this even more desirable by protecting the reasonable expectations of view access. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
John Hall, and I'll be moving him over as well.
Hello.
Hi, John.
Hello. Good evening. My name is John Hall. I live at 9970 Southeast 40th Street, Mercer Island. I've been a resident of the neighborhood since 1958 and at this house since 1981. Amendment to Mercer Island City Code 19.15.240, reclassification of property rezones. I agree with Matt, the conditional use permit should not be able to rezone to commercial office. I ask that you who live on the island in the residential zone, how would you feel if a large section of residential properties next to your house was suddenly zoned commercial, office? The traffic, the noise, the overflow of street parking, all the consistent with the residential zone. These conditions have already been violated over and over again. Furthermore, I think it's bad policy to be converting residential properties into some other non-housing zone when the state and county are claiming that there is housing supply crisis, which is leading to the housing affordability crisis. This intersection is one of the busiest and most important on Mercer Island. Matt and I submitted written comments on the seeker permit filed by Herzl's B-zone property addressing all the competing uses for this property, including the new city hall, the new maintenance building, proposed office and school on the B-zone property, preschool of the Herzl property, the French American School, the JCC, the commercial properties that include the Gold Building and residents trying to go north and south on East Mercer Way and go up Gallagher Hill to the mid and south areas of the island. Regarding last year's JCC rezone applications, the citizens were suddenly told that it was a quasi-judicial process and nobody at the city or the council could talk to us about it. Meanwhile, the JCC's been discussing this for literally years with the planning department and continue to discuss it. And presumably we're told the legal criteria of the city would determine whether it's a legal site-specific rezone or a spot zone. Meanwhile, the neighbors and their lawyer are kept in the dark
30
about what the
seconds.
criteria would be. Whether the JCC's application addresses the criteria or whether the cities or outside counsel propose legal criteria or actual criteria the court will apply. This is in support of Matt Goldbot's number 5 amendment that states the property zone tone center, commercial office B, PBZ cannot use residential.
Mr. Hall, thank you for your comments.
You know, this is really unfair not to be able to speak your mind.
Chair, we have Daniel Thompson in person.
Good evening. My name is Daniel Thompson. I live at 7265 North Mercer Way, and I've been a resident of Mercer Island since 1970. First, I'd like to thank this Planning Commission for its work over the last 2 years on the comprehensive plan. I know what a project that was. What I'd like to do in this public appearance is to explain the differences between the Planning Commission's draft and the Council's draft. There are 2 fundamental themes in each plan. The Council agrees with the Planning Commission that Mercer Island should be an environmentally sustainable community. However, the Council disagreed with the Planning Commission that Mercer Island should be principally a low and moderate density community. The Council's vision is that Mercer Island is principally a low density community. The Council debated this extensively. Adam Zach, when asked, told the Council that moderate density means 2 to 4 dwellings per lot. It's not hard to see that the Council's vision is that the single family zone remain primarily a single dwelling per lot zone. Next year, the key will be how to implement 1337 and HB 1110 while adopting development regulations for the residential zone that encourage or result in 1 dwelling per lot. I think the Planning Commission approached it from the opposite approach. I'd like to explain how we got here. In 2022, Salim Neese and Jeff Thomas successfully lobbied the GMPC to give us a no new net housing target So we have 1,239 units through 2044 to permit. Mercer Island's existing zoning allows approximately 1,430 new units, so we are already done. However, King County through 1220 mandated that nearly all those housing targets must go into the town center where they have the possibility of being affordable and somebody can afford to live without a car because there's walkable transit and retail. According to the US Census Bureau, the Office of Financial Management's future population growth estimates are grossly inflated. Both the city of Duval and Snoqualmie have now appealed to the Growth Management Planning Council to have their housing allocations reduced based on that. Our council, like most Eastside councils, has no desire to increase its
30 seconds.
GMPC housing target more than it already is. Since we have already met that allocation with town center housing and upzoning, there is no reason whatsoever to upzone or encourage more density in the single family zone. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Chair. That was our last speaker.
Okay, then if we are complete with public appearances, we'll move on to regular business. The first item of regular business is to review and consider approving the September 25 meeting minutes. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Motion moved by Commissioner Murphy and seconded by Commissioner Ragab to approve the minutes. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Accuse, Chair Batazzo,
Aye.
Commissioner Rashiz, Commissioner Ragab,
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
And with that, the motion passes. Our second item of regular business is the 2025 annual docket, proposed amendments 1 through 15. We will now move to this section of our meeting where project proponents will speak on their proposals. A note to the project proponents, you will have 3 minutes within which you can speak on your proposal. Raven, could you please identify the proponents signed up to speak to their proposals this evening and promote them to speak when it's their turn?
Thank you, Chair. Our first speaker is Jessica Clausen, speaking on number 1. Amendment number 1.
Thank you.
Commissioners, can you hear and see me? Okay, great. Hi, I'm Jessie Clausen. I'm a land use attorney and Mercer Island resident, and this suggestion is my own, not on behalf of any particular client, though I do think it would help some of the issues faced by some of the island's institutions and clubs. My amendment would apply only to non-single family structures in single family zones outside of town center. So that's kind of complicated. But in 2017, the city, when it was regulating mega homes, unwittingly put in a maximum size of use restriction that also applied to existing non-single family structures in single family zones. So it made things like the beach club, the country club, the JCC, and other churches and institutions non-conforming as to their size of use. You've heard a lot about this issue over the years. One of the issues with the non-conforming language as it currently exists is if you change the exterior of a building, the 50% assessed value threshold is triggered, meaning you can't spend more than 50% of the value of your building on a remodel, or you have to bring your building all the way up to land use code. That obviously doesn't work with the size of use restrictions. So this significantly limits remodels in a way that is very restrictive. My proposed change clarifies that you can touch the outside of your building without triggering the 50% value threshold. So you can replace a window or a wall and reconfigure a building without having to bring it up to non-conforming land use or to conforming land use. It's also clear that it's not intended to allow for an enlargement. So clubs and churches can't get bigger, which has always been an issue people have been worried about. If they get bigger, if they enlarge, they would have to comply with the whole land use code. So that's my idea. I know the city has stated this isn't a priority given all that's going on, and I appreciate it's a very busy time for planners and for Planning Commission and City Council. However, I would offer that this amendment could be worked into however the city chooses to adopt HB 1110, which is the Middle Housing Initiative. That housing initiative deals with single family zones. And so it would be a relatively easy fix in that context. And I think the due date for that is sometime mid next year. You know, you've heard me say this before, but our clubs and institutions are part of what makes our island special, and making sure that the land use regulations are supportive of remodeling them is important. The comp plan language that is currently in draft form also supports keeping clubs and institutions on the island and well functioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be calling Matt Goldbach to the podium. He's speaking on proposed amendments 3 through 6.
What happened to Amendment 2?
The proponent for Amendment 2 did not register to speak tonight.
Okay. I'm Matt Goldbach. I live at 9980 Southeast 40th Street. And I've lived at this location since 2014. I filed 4 amendments for the 25 docket, 2 of which are from repeats from last year, and 2 are new. So number 3, which is a repeat from last year, this proposed amendment prohibits single-family residentially zoned properties as set forth in Appendix D in the zoning map from being rezoned to any other zone. During the Planning Commission's deliberations and the draft of the comprehensive plan, a primary focus was on increasing the amount of housing and making it more affordable. This is reflected in King County's required upzone of the town center under HB 1220 and the legislature's upzone residential zone in HB 1110. Both of these bills hope to increase the amount of residential housing and by doing so, reducing its cost. Good second. Therefore, it makes no sense to allow properties that is currently zoned residential on Mercer Island to be rezoned to any other use. The legislature and King County have not identified a crisis in the availability of commercial or retail space or its affordability. Mercer Island at this point should stop any destruction of residential property by allowing it to be rezoned into another use. Otherwise, the policies of HB 1220 and HB 1110 are basically meaningless. And that's what I have on Amendment 3. Can I sit down or am I going to do number 4?
Please continue.
You can continue through all of your amendments.
I can do all of them. Okay, great. If I knew that, I would have brought a drink. Amendment number 4, MICC 19.15.240, reclassification of properties. This amendment requests that the conditional use permit be prohibited from rezoning its single-family residential properties into any other zone. The amendment is directly predicted in the Mercer Island Community Planning and Development Interpretation 22-004 issued on November 21st, 2022, which held that a conditional use permit should not obtain a variance of structure located or for structures located in the residential zone. Administrative Interpretation 22-004 held that allowing conditional use permit in which alone removes residential housing in the residential zone would be directly contrary to Mercer Island's comprehensive plan as it existed in 2022. Conditional use permits already enjoy the benefits of being allowed uses not allowed in the residential zone. The council previously adopted a code amendment that prohibits conditional use permits from expanding its use to adjacent residentially zoned properties not part of the CUP without completely reopening the CUP in order to analyze such use. These CUPs do not pay property taxes as they are formed by nonprofit organizations. It is also important to note that the City Council specifically rejected the Planning Commission's draft language in the comprehensive plan that stated, quote, "The council should consider needs of conditional use permits in the residential zone," and instead adopted language that states may consider the needs of conditional use permits, period. As a result, both of these amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan as drafted by the council, HB 1110, and King County's housing policies under HB 1220. That's 4. Those are the 2 from the previous year. You ready for 5? Okay. Amendment number 5. MICC 19.06.110, criteria for approval, conditional use permits. I submitted a proposed code amendment for the 2025 docket. This proposal for the 2025. It requests that the code be amended to add a section that states no conditional use permit on residential property shall be used for any other purpose by a separate property zoned TC, CO, B, or PBZ. This proposed amendment is to prevent non-residential properties from expanding into non-residential use in a residential zone by a conditional use permit in the residential property. That's quite a sentence. The amendment is almost directly consistent with the council's adoption in 2021 that prohibited existing conditional use permits in the residential zone from using residentially zoned property not within the CUP for CUP purposes. Furthermore, the city treats a specific, one second, I think we just jumped a page there. What this amendment is designed to do is to prevent commercial or business zone properties from transferring their parking, playgrounds, or other required on-site amenities to an adjacent residential property, which again destroys housing stock, causes housing prices to increase, and due to declining housing stock, and results in commercial creep into the residential zone. And that's the end of number 5. Number 6 relates to MICC 1915.240, reclassification of properties. This amendment proposes that the code be amended to set forth the legal criteria to determine whether the proposed reclassification does not constitute an illegal site-specific rezone. MICC 1915.240 (C) (4) specifically states that in any rezone, quote, the proposed reclassification does not constitute an illegal specific site rezone, unquote. However, the code does not set forth what constitutes an illegal site-specific rezone. Even when a code is silent to determine whether a specific rezone is legal or illegal, courts will apply the legal criteria. I believe that the legal criteria should be included in the code itself. This provides the applicant with an understanding of those criteria it must address, and its application guides planning department, planning commission in its review of whether the reclassification is an illegal site-specific zone, and provides counsel with the same for its ultimate review. Furthermore, the city treats a site-specific rezone as a quasi-judicial proceeding. This means the applicant can communicate directly with the planning department, but the citizens and neighborhood cannot. Therefore, the citizens and neighbors do not know what the legal criteria to be applied are, so they and their lawyers can create a record for an appeal to the Superior Court. Currently, the JCC is requesting a rezone of its residential property to commercial office. This year, the JCC filed an application for this rezone. Last year, the JCC filed an application for the rezone. The planning department will be required to obtain a legal opinion about whether the rezone is illegal, site-specific rezone under MICC 19-240, However, the JCC was never aware of what those criteria would be in their application. And in my opinion, the application does not address the legal criteria necessary for a legal site-specific rezone. The amendment does not prohibit site-specific rezones. It simply asks for the proper legal criteria for a legal site-specific rezone be included in MICC 19.15.240 so that the applicant, planning department, planning commission, citizens, neighbors, and council know the criteria that will be applied and are able to apply them to the rezone in order to complete the underlying record for any appeal to Superior Court. And that is it.
And I will next submit Jeff Haley. He is here for proposed amendment number 8. Jeff, we can't hear you.
Mr. Haley, you're muted.
We can't hear you.
There it is. Having trouble getting sharing started.
You're sharing your screen. We're currently viewing your email.
Looks like I now have the right share presented. My name is Jeff Haley. My wife Carol and I live one lot back from the water on the east side. Our lot is part of a former large waterfront parcel. A former owner of the large parcel and his children built a house well back from the water, then a one-story waterfront house with a flat roof to maintain views from behind it, and then between these two, a two-story house with a kitchen and living room on the upper story to have a view over the waterfront house. Before I bought the middle house, family members planted a hedge right on the property line. I maintained the top of the hedge. Here is a photo from 2012, taken 2 years after my last trimming in 2010. In 2011, the family sold the waterfront house to a new owner who refused to let me ever again trim the top of the hedge. I sued for an order that my neighbor must trim the top or allow me to trim it. Finding there was no valid reason why the hedge should be so tall, the court granted my request and ordered that the hedge be cut shorter. The attorney fees cost me more than $80,000. But my new neighbor appealed and it was reversed on a technicality. It would cost me more than another $80,000 to cure the technicality and relitigate the issue. Rather than continue to pursue this issue for my benefit alone, I am trying to solve this problem for everyone who suffers from a tall hedge on the property of a neighbor. Most cities prohibit hedges near a property line taller than 6 feet. Many cities have repealed these ordinances because they are too expensive for the city to enforce. In recent decades, cities have replaced them with ordinances that put all the burden and cost of enforcement on the suffering property owner. When there is a dispute, the parties go to arbitration and the city is not even notified. Normandy Park took this approach in 2017. 16 years later, in 2023, the town of Yarrow Point adopted a similar ordinance. The ordinances allow adjoining property owners to maintain a hedge at any height the two of them agree on. The ordinances declare it to be a nuisance to have a hedge taller than a default height if there is no agreement. I copied these ordinances, and based on my recent litigation experience, I added 3 clauses. First, a property owner may cut any part of a hedge at the property line. It's actually a state law, but it's not clear enough because of a court decision about trees. Second, if a complainant prevails, he or she may trim the entire top of a hedge that straddles the line so both sides are uniform. Third, if a party's position in a dispute has no reasonable basis, attorney's fees can be awarded. I will gladly answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. Our next speaker is Commissioner Adam Regev.
All right. Thank you for recognizing me. Just for clarity, I'm speaking as a resident proponent of a docket proposal, not as a commissioner. Just this has been slightly modified from last year. And I just want to articulate some of the new changes since last year. Since that, I asked that the Planning Commission recommend that this be docketed because in addition to satisfying the basic docketing criteria, 1, the public has called for it. 2, despite what's implied, I think, in the findings, it's my understanding that it is compliant with House Bill 1110. It is consistent, regulating parking is consistent and specifically called for in the comp plan, namely the draft that the City Council has recently put out for public review. And the priority level here is high. We have until June 30, 2025 as a city to allow middle housing. And as the code currently states, only single family housing outside of the town center has parking regulations. So a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex has nothing in the code right now. The public has called for it. We have findings H and C of the Planning Commission findings specifically address that that the Planning Commission note it's important to families and those who are handicapped. And then the city administered survey says, hey, people are concerned with more people parking on neighborhood streets, traffic and parked cars affecting pedestrians' safety, and any reduced parking requirements may cause more people to park on the street. House Bill 1110, this is consistent with it, I believe. Section 6B says that the regulations may not be more restrictive than those for single family houses. The intent is to match what single family houses require. 6D says, yes, you cannot require off-street parking as a condition of permitting development if you're within a half-mile walking of mass transit, but Section 7A provides one of many pathways for relief from that restrictive section. Consistency and called for in the comp plan, look at the land use section, goal 15. Goal 15.6 reads, manage impacts that could result from new development in residential zones by establishing standards to the first thing mentioned, regulate on and off street parking. Comp plan calls for it. Priority level here is high. We must allow middle housing types by June 30th, 2025. And right now, MICC 1902-020 G2 only applies to single family residences. It's essential that this new development follow the same standards as single family homes. I don't want my children or anyone else's to have to walk or bike to school or their friends' houses in an unsafe street environment let's close the gap that these changes will open up in our city code. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Daniel Thompson. Speaking on proposed amendments 10 through 14.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Thompson. I've been a resident of Mercer Island since 1970. The planning department takes great pains to note that my proposed amendments have been filed in the last 4 years and were not adopted last year. But the planning department fails to note that the planning department co-sponsored each of these amendments last year. The planning commission recommended all of them in 2022 for the 2023 docket, and the council directed the planning department to add these to the docket last year. In years past, the planning department has opposed adding these amendments to the docket on the basis they should be reserved until the entire RDS is revisited. The RDS will be revisited in 2025 in its entirety, so these amendments are timely. Amendment 10 would reduce ceiling height from 12 feet to 10 feet before counting as clerestory space and against the gross floor area to gross lot area. I'm surprised the Planning Commission did not include this proposed amendment in its draft comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission spent a great deal of time trying to encourage or require smaller homes in order to reduce carbon emissions due to heating and cooling the buildings. But the council rejected the Planning Commission's approach because the council did not want to lower the gross floor area to lot area ratio and usable floor space, which is 40% on Mercer Island and already the lowest GFAR in the region after the 2017 code rewrite. The history of this is a little interesting. 10-foot ceiling heights are the industry norm for tall ceilings. The Planning Commission recommended 10 feet in 2017. However, Dan Grouse increased it without notice to 12 feet during the council adoption of the RDS because his house had 12-foot ceilings and he planned to sell. Allowing ceilings to go from 10 feet to 12 feet without counting as clerestory space provides no additional living area while increasing the volume of the entire house 20%. Furthermore, that 20% at the top of the ceiling is the hardest to heat and cool. So if the Planning Commission's intent really was to reduce carbon emissions from heating and cooling a house rather than just requiring smaller houses, and the council has no intent to reduce minimum lot size, this amendment is a no-brainer because it will reduce carbon emissions by at least 20% without reducing livable gross floor area 1 inch. Now I'd like to move to number 11. Amendment 11 would include exterior covered decks in the definition of gross floor area and include covered porches on the first level in the calculation of gross floor area. This is primarily an issue of massing, or the feeling the house is out of scale for the lot, which was the driving focus of the 2017 RDS rewrite. This amendment came after the RDS was adopted. A citizen wanted a small covered area in order to barbecue in the rain. Instead, Evan Maxim converted it into exempting all covered decks on the first floor surrounding the house. The problem is that a covered deck, especially a covered deck with railings, creates gross floor area and house volume compared to the lot area that is equal if that deck area was actually a room. To exempt gross floor area from the gross floor area ratio does not make the gross floor area go away. For example, my house has an outdoor deck area almost equal to the interior gross floor area of the first floor. If I were able to cover all of those decks, it would essentially double the gross floor area or volume of the first floor of my house and increase its massing. This was an ill-considered amendment by Evan Maxim, and we should change it. Okay, this is Amendment 12. Amendment 12 eliminates the ability of a waterfront house that is allowed under the code to switch the front and rear yards because the Department of Ecology requires a 25-foot setback on the waterfront lot to build a garage that is partially above grade 10 feet into the property setback of the front yard in the back of the house. Now, this proposed amendment is so esoteric, I've had difficulty in getting anybody to understand it, and I've almost given up. It may not be as relevant now that the state has prohibited cities from requiring on-site parking be covered. However, it seems to me that if a waterfront homeowner is allowed the privilege to reduce their non-waterfront yard setback from 25 to 20 feet, they should not be allowed to build their parking garage 10 feet into that 20-foot yard that is above grade. This seems very unfair to me for the property behind the waterfront house, who not only sees the yard between the houses reduced 5 feet, but an above grade garage intrudes another 10 feet into that already reduced setback. People building houses on the waterfront of Mercer Island have the funds to be able to build the garage completely below grade. I'd like to turn now to Amendment 13. Amendment 13 would limit the gross floor area bonus for ADUs for lots below 10,000 square feet to lots 8,400 square feet or smaller. Currently, a lot under 10,000 square feet can receive an additional 5% gross floor area for an ADU or 500 square feet, whichever is less. This results in a much larger ADU bonus as the lot gets smaller, which is somewhat the reverse of what the bonus is intended to do. Bonus gross floor area for more than one dwelling on the lot will be probably the most critical issue for the Planning Commission next year. It is, the council will probably choose to not allow multiple dwellings on a residential lot to have greater gross floor area to lot area ratio than a single family house has. For example, Mayor Harold's new plan for Seattle allows additional gross floor area for additional dwellings on the lot. Mercer Island's not going to do that, I don't think, not from what I can tell from the comprehensive plan that it just drafted. Now, to some effect, this amendment may actually be superseded by the council's decision to eliminate any gross floor area bonus for an ADU or multiple dwellings to discourage the construction of more than one dwelling on a single family home lot. As I mentioned in the public appearance, that was the single disconnect between the Planning Commission's comprehensive plan draft and the council's. The council does not want more dwellings on a single family lot. Now, ideally, we could keep the bonus for an ADU, but then not have it apply to a duplex, triplex, or a quadplex. And if so, then I'd like to see it apply to smaller houses and not something that's 10,000 square feet. Now, getting to my final amendment. This is asking that the code be amended to where each single family dwelling with a gross floor area of 3,000 square feet or more shall have at least 3 parking spaces sufficient in size to park a passenger automobile. What I really want that to do is to apply to 2,000 square foot houses. The basis for this was kind of getting at what Commissioner Roget was getting at in his amendment. The original intent of this code provision was to allow smaller houses on Mercer Island to have only one covered garage stall so that they could use the other for more living area under their gross floor area to lot area ratio. Rather than a 2-car garage, one of the garage stalls would be converted to a living area, and they would only have 2 on-site parking stalls, one covered, one not. This provision is no longer necessary because state law now prohibits a city from requiring any on-site parking minimums to be covered. So there's no real reason to give an exemption, certainly to a house that's 3,000 square feet for only one parking lot. I think along with bonuses for extra dwellings on single family lots the parking issue, and I think Adam gets at that, that's going to be the second most important issue next year for the council when they are drafting the development regulations to implement 1110. The most critical fact was Senator Wellman, at the request of Salim Neese, made sure that cities controlled their regulatory limits when applying 1110. And cities are going to be able to use those regulatory limits to encourage more dwellings on single-family lots or not. The problem for Mercer Island is we have already exceeded our Growth Management Planning Council future housing projections through 2044. And those are based on what most people now believe are inflated future population projections by the Office of Financial Management. So to upzone the single family zones, it makes no sense. We are not being told by any agency that we need that housing. The region needs the housing. And the city's own land use analysis supplement pointed out that just the average cost of a house on Mercer Island, which includes tear downs, is $16,000 a month. So we are never going to create affordable housing in the single family zones, which is exactly why King County has required that almost all of our GMPC housing allocations go into the town center. So I don't know if that is what this planning commission wants, but I'm pretty sure that's where the council is going to go next year with their regulatory limits. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We now have our final speaker, Joe White, speaking on proposed amendment 15, and we'll be moving him over now. Mr. White, we cannot hear you.
Hi, sorry. I'm trying to share my screen. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, all. Thank you for having me. My name is Joe. My docket addresses an issue with shading of domestic solar panels by excessively tall boundary hedges. I am proposing a minor addition to the existing fence ordinance, so adjoining property owners can limit the height of boundary hedges to 12 feet when they are located within the side yard setback, unless mutually agreed. Sorry. Mercer Island has committed to a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emission by 2030. There are around 250 solar installations across the island out of roughly 9,800 households. There is a big opportunity for us to increase the adoption of solar generation on these residential sites, which represents 88% of land use on the island. Improving solar access of residential sites is an effective way to support the city's carbon emission target. In addition, this proposal will improve access to natural sunlight for residents at home, which will reduce the need for artificial lighting and heating. Exposure to natural sunlight is also important in the Pacific Northwest region, where seasonal affective disorder is a known health risk. Solar systems are a long-term investment with very high initial costs. These costs are offset by continual energy output from the panels, whose production is highly dependent on their sun exposure. This graph shows the average electricity production from the system at the Mercer Island Community Center over the last 4 years. As you can see, the production per daylight hour in the winter months is only 20% of the output during the summer months, mostly due to shadowing effects from the thick clouds in the winter. Dense shadows cast by excessively tall boundary hedges have the same negative impact on solar systems, which present a barrier to guaranteeing access to sunlight for the panels. This docket aims to limit boundary hedges to a reasonable height to provide assurance to people that their solar installation will be viable for the expected operating life. A typical installation such as the 4.4 kilowatt system at the community center produces about half the electricity usage of a typical islander home during the summer months, and about a quarter of the typical usage in fall and spring. The adoption of this docket proposal will allow islanders to contribute to the city's climate.
That was our last speaker, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now ask Deputy Director Van Gorp and Senior Planner Molly McGuire to present the staff reports on the proposals. Since we limited proponents to only 3 minutes per proposal, the city also has 3 minutes to discuss for a combined presentation total of 45 minutes. Hi, Deputy Director Van Gorp.
Yeah, Molly's going to share the presentation. I'll go through the first few slides and then hand it off to her. She's going to walk you through each of the proposals and the staff comments on them. Can you advance the slide, Molly? All right, so as always, this is the annual docket process, and this is the opportunity for the public to propose comprehensive plan and development code amendments. Tonight, the Planning Commission is conducting a preliminary review of the proposed items and making a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council makes the final determination of which items are placed on the final docket and added to the work plan for 2025. They will be doing that at the November 19th meeting. Next slide. Just to give you a quick overview of the procedures in our code. So code amendments and comprehensive plan amendments can be submitted by people from the public to the city manager, department directors, or the City Council, Planning Commission, or other boards and commissions. Amendments that are proposed by the public need to come in with an application as part of the annual docketing process. They need to be submitted between September 1st and October 1st each year. And as I said, the Planning Commission reviews them and makes a recommendation, and then the City Council needs to establish the final docket before the end of the year. And that sets the work plan for the Planning Commission and the CPD staff. Next slide, please. Okay, the code also prescribes 5 criteria that should be used to determine if something is eligible for the docket. I'll go through these quickly, and then the commission should consider these criteria as you evaluate each proposal and make a determination on whether to recommend it for the docket. So the first criteria is whether it presents a matter that's appropriately addressed through the comprehensive plan or the code. So that would mean, items that are typically included as a comprehensive plan, goal, or policy, or something that's regulated by the development code. Criteria 2 is that the city can provide the resources, including staff and budget, necessary to review the proposal, or resources can be provided by an applicant for an amendment. And that second clause there about the resources being provided by the applicant, that typically comes through payment of a permit fee. If a proponent submits a docket proposal as what's called an application in the code, they are charged permit fees that are intended to help cover the cost for reviewing that proposal. Criteria 3, the proposal does not raise policy or land use issues that are more appropriately addressed by an ongoing work program item approved by the City Council. So essentially, if we're already working on this item, the proposal should not be docketed again. And criteria 4, the proposal will serve the public interest by implementing specifically identified goals of the comprehensive plan, or a new approach supporting the city's vision. And then criteria 5, the essential elements of the proposal and proposed outcome have not been considered by the City Council in the last 3 years. However, the city council can waive that should they decide there's a change in circumstances that justify the need for it. So, and what we mean, the way we interpret this is that, you know, being considered by the city council means that it's actually undergone a legislative review. So just considering it for the docket isn't enough to get rolled out here. All right. Can you advance the slide? Thanks. All right, so I wanted to go a little bit over what's on our work plan right now, since that's a big piece of what you need to consider is, do we have the resources to do these things? As many of you are probably aware, there was a large number of things docketed last year, and we haven't had a chance to begin review of most of them yet. So there's a list in the packet. I did want to note that there was an error in the packet. It had noted that docket item 23.6 was included in the 24 annual docket, and that was incorrect. It should be 23-14, which is highlighted here. Both of those related to the calculation of the downhill building facade height. However, the one that was docketed was the one proposed by Reagan McClellan, not the one proposed by the city. So it's 23-14. And then, you know, there's several other items still remaining from last year as well. We do anticipate beginning to review these items going into 2025. However, it's likely that this will spill over again into 2026 because just the large volume of the items that we need to work through. And many of these are related to state legislation and have deadlines. And so those items are going to take some precedence in terms of meeting those state mandates, and things without those hard deadlines will then have to get picked up after in the second half of 2025. And like I was saying, you know, they may spill over into 2026. I think that's likely. Next slide, Molly. In addition, we have a number of interim regulations that have been adopted this year or in prior years that will need to be addressed in 2025, either to renew the interim regulations or to adopt permanent regulations. So right now we have 4 sets of these interim regulations going, related, 3 of them related to state legislation that's been adopted in the last couple of years, and 1 of them related to temporary uses and structures. And then just a final note at the bottom of the slide there, I think you're all aware of this, but for everyone's general knowledge, anything that's added to the docket is going to remain on the docket until a decision is made. So once something's docketed, it needs to go through the full legislative review by the Planning Commission and the Council. So that what that means is that, you know, as the size of the docket continues to grow, we are sort of booking out that legislative review time in the future. We can't make a decision at a later time and say, well, we docketed this back in 2024, but now it's 2026 and we've got some other priorities. Like, we're just not going to do some of these. That's not possible. We need to give them a legislative review once they've been docketed. So we want to be prudent with the decisions that are made in terms of how much stuff we commit to for the future. All right, next slide. Okay, so Molly's going to walk through in a minute and go through the staff comments on each proposal, and then we'll ask the commission to consider each proposed amendment one by one, discuss whether the docketing criteria are met for each proposal, and then make a motion and vote on whether you would like to recommend it to the city council for the docket. All right, Molly, why don't you jump on and take away the rest of the presentation? Thanks.
Hello, thank you. So like Allison said, I'll be providing summaries of the 15 docket proposals. And if you want to follow along, exhibits 1, 2, and 4 would be very helpful. For that, 1 and 2 are summaries and the actual proposals by the residents. And then exhibit 4 is the docketing criteria matrix that outlines whether the proposals meet the criteria and is eligible to be added to the docket. So Amendment 1 was submitted by Jessica Clausen to exclude exterior alteration of non-single family non-conforming structures outside of the town center from the determination of non-conforming status during a remodel. She went into some more detail there, so I won't go into crazy detail on this, but currently, non-conforming structures other than single family outside of the town center would need to limit exterior alteration or enlargement to less than 50% of the King County assessed value to remain legally non-conforming and avoid being subject to those standards. So it can be determined that this proposal meets 4 of the 5 docketing criteria, and given existing commitments in the CPD work plan that Allison went over, it would be considered low priority. And if it is docketed, it would need to be carried over to a future year for review. And I'm not sure, just for clarification, if I want to move forward through all of the proposals or if we want to do recommendations in between each one.
I'm inclined to have you walk through all of this very quickly so that we can move on to deliberations.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you. Unless my fellow commissioners have any other. Great, let's keep going as you were.
Okay, so Amendment 2 was submitted by Sarah Fletcher, consisting of comments on the open space and housing elements of the draft comprehensive plan. This proposal doesn't meet criteria number 3, as the issues raised in the proposal are already under consideration by the City Council. It would be better considered a public comment on the draft comprehensive plan, so it's ineligible for the final docket.
Quick question on this. It's ineligible for the final docket, but I believe I saw in the notes in the staff report that all of those comments were received and applied to the comprehensive plan. So they didn't just go into a void, they actually went into the plan comment system.
That's correct. Those comments will be provided to the City Council as a part of their review of the periodic update.
Great, thank you.
So amendments 3 through 6 were proposed by Matthew Goldbach, 3 of which have to do with the criteria for rezones and the other for conditional use permit criteria. You heard detailed summaries from him, but the first would prohibit a single family residentially zoned property from being rezoned to another zone. Staff is unsure whether a code amendment is the appropriate method here and would recommend a study to determine how to achieve the goals of this proposal if it is docketed. And also given previous commitments, again, low priority, kind of similar to the first one. Amendment 4 would prohibit a non-residential structure or use in single-family residential zones, including a conditional use, from requesting or obtaining a rezone of a single-family residentially zoned property. The comments and ratings for this one are similar to the previous proposal, and it's ranked as low priority. Amendment 5 would add a section to the CUP criteria for a change after a CUP is granted that would not allow CUP on a residentially zoned property to be used for any use or purpose by a separate property zoned town center, commercial office, business, or planned business zone. Similar comments on that one as well. And Amendment 6 would provide more definition to what does and does not constitute an illegal site-specific rezone by providing some broad definitions of the conditions under which a rezone is acceptable. If this is docketed, staff recommends a study on the appropriate method for achieving the goals of this proposal, similarly ranked as low priority. Amendment 7, submitted by Daniel Grove, would define the term facade and amend the maximum downhill facade height. Amendments to the maximum downhill facade height were included in the 2024 annual docket, and these changes remain on the CPD work plan as Allison went over. The issues raised in this proposal are already under consideration and is ineligible for the final docket under criteria 3.
I have a quick question about that one. I think did I also read in the notes that you would consider the feedback received under Amendment 7 as you were reviewing the previous amendment?
Yeah, so both of these docket proposals are very similar in terms of how they're proposing to deal with this issue relating to the downhill building height measurement. And we can add both of those, concepts to the analysis once we begin review of this item.
Okay, thank you.
Amendment 8, submitted by Jeff Haley, would add a new chapter to Title 19 to provide a voluntary mechanism for the resolution of disputes involving the height of hedges. It is unclear whether the development code is the appropriate mechanism for regulating hedge height as a nuisance and establishing a process for resolving disputes between property owners. If this is docketed, staff recommends a study on the appropriate method for this. And a case could be made that 3 of the 5 criteria are met, and the item is given a low priority due to existing commitments on the work plan. Amendment 9, submitted by Adam Regeb, would require that each residential unit in a residential zone with a GFA of less than 3,000 square feet have at least 2 parking spaces, and any residential unit with a GFA of more than 3,000 feet be treated the same as a single-family residence and subject to the requirements in the code section cited there. Recent state legislature will require the city to amend these residential standards to allow middle housing types. So a study would be necessary to determine if this aligns with those or not. If docketed, it could be included in that work. And again, low priority due to existing commitments. The next 5 items were submitted by Daniel Thompson, all propose amendments to various residential development standards. In 2023, City Council directed staff to address these items in the residential development standards analysis, which the work has been delayed in response to state legislature requiring substantial changes to the code. These would need to be enacted by June 30th of 2025. They do remain under consideration for review during this analysis and are still eligible to be added to the 2025 docket. So starting with the first one here, an amendment to the residential development standards for calculating gross floor area, where the ceiling height would be reduced from 12 feet to 10 feet before it is counted at 150% of the gross floor area. The next with gross floor area calculation, where exterior covered decks and covered porches on the first floor would be included in GFA. Currently, first floor covered decks and porches are exempted from GFA, and second and third story covered decks are included in GFA. Amendment 12 would eliminate the ability to construct garages and carports within 10 feet from the property line for lots with steep slopes, or eliminate this option for only waterfront lots. 13 would limit GFA incentives for accessory dwelling units to lots that are 8,400 square feet or smaller, whereas currently this incentive is available for all residentially zoned lots, provided the GFA does not exceed 4,500 square feet or 45% of the lot area, whichever is less. And Amendment 14 would reduce the threshold for requiring only 2 parking spaces from 3,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet. So any residence that exceeds 2,000 square feet will require the 3 parking spaces. Each of these proposals have the same criteria compliance analysis. A case could be made that criteria 1, 3, 4, and 5 are met, and criteria 2 is listed as moderate priority. Due to staff resources and with consideration that these items could be worked into the RDS analysis as previously directed. And finally, Amendment 15, submitted by Joe White, is similar to Amendment 8 in that it regulates hedge height within yard setbacks. However, it would not be a voluntary mechanism to resolve disputes between property owners. This proposal may require opening up different sections of the code, which may mean more studies and resources. So it was given a low priority. If docketed, staff recommends a study on the appropriate method for achieving these goals, and it may need to be carried over to a future year if docketed. And again here, just going over the decision process as Allison did.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions of our city staff? No. Okay, anything further from our city friends? Oh.
I'm not sure if we're going to get into that now.
That for later?
Yeah.
All right. With that then, Gentlemen, you saw that staff requested that we make recommendations on each of the proposed amendments. I think I first want to just open for, are there any comments or questions very broadly for the good of the order about this process? Anything big picture that either of you want to share or point out before we get into the minutia? Seeing none on your faces. Yeah, I think the only thing I want to say as we get into this, I had to constantly remind myself what my role is in this process. And I had to continue to go back to criteria 1 through 5, because that's really what, this is the initial step in reviewing a community proposal on how to amend our code. And criteria 1 through 5 are our guiding principles on moving this forward or making a recommendation to city council. It is with that I would like to make a motion to dismiss or not docket proposals 2 and 7 because they do not meet the criteria necessary for moving forward.
I'd second that motion.
So the motion to dismiss items 2 and 7 was proposed by Battazzo and seconded by Murphy. Discussion.
I think it's been pretty clear from the presentation and the material that these are not really appropriate to be docketed for the reasons stated.
Commissioner Regab.
Yeah, I think, yeah, proposal number 7 appears to already be covered by 23-14, so makes sense to me.
If no further discussion, Raven, can you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Chair. Chair Battazzo.
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Aye.
Commissioner Regab.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Regab, did you say nay or aye? I didn't catch that. Okay, thank you.
That was an aye.
Just checking. Okay. Unless anyone has any burning issues, I think we can start at the top and work our way through. Is there a motion on the table to accept proposed amendment number 1 for the docket?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Regab, seconded by Murphy. Any discussion? Hearing none. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Commissioner Regab.
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Aye.
Chair Battazzo.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Hey, guys, don't make me be the only one with motions.
I'll move to accept item number 3 for docketing.
I'll second for discussion.
Oh, I guess
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, discussion wise, I mean, there was a valid argument put forth, right? Everyone's saying housing shortage, and this is essentially trying to preserve quantity of housing. Seems like a valid argument if we take what we're hearing from, the legislature, King County, the state at its face value. So, as we'll see, there's language in the comp plan saying we're primarily a residential community. So the arguments are valid in favor of it.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, I understand those points and I have some sympathy with them. But the problem with this one and the others by Matt are that they unduly restrict the city in its ability to perform necessary functions. And it's really unduly restrictive and unfair to tie the hands of future city councils and administrators in operating a city, because rezones can be necessary to accomplish objectives that are unknown at the present time.
I think if I were just to weigh in, and considering this and most of the proposals from Mr. Goldbach, excepting number 6, I am inclined to think they're a bit extreme in terms of tying the city's hands. And the quantity of looking at this relative to what we're looking at the docket, I think we just want to be judicious about what we can put on that plate. So I'm not sure that this is the appropriate mechanism for addressing the housing issue and the issues that continue to be brought up by Mr. Goldbach. Anything further before we take a vote? So the motion was to accept proposed amendment number 3, moved by Ragab and seconded by Battazo. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Battazo,
Nay.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Nay.
Commissioner Ragab.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. That would be 2 nays and 1 aye.
Thank you. So the motion fails. Point of clarification, Allison, if the motion fails, does that mean we do not recommend that for the docket?
That's correct.
Thank you. Commissioners, I'll do a better job of reporting what our results are at the end. Apologies. That brings us to proposed amendment 4. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
4. Sorry, can you just be clear?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'll move that we, for the sake of discussion, I'll move that we recommend number 4 for docketing.
Thank you. Moved. Okay, I'll second for discussion. Adam, is there anything you want to say about this?
I mean, this one seems to be covered by number 23-18 that's currently on the docket. So I fail to see this one meeting the criteria. So I'm not going to recommend it for docketing.
Okay, didn't you just move to accept it for docketing? Didn't you just?
For the sake of discussion.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, you can also move to dismiss it.
Fair enough. I didn't know that. I'm trying to be positive.
I appreciate that. Mike, anything to add?
No.
Great. Raven, can you please call the roll? The motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment number 4 for the docket.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Battazo.
Nay.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Nay.
Commissioner Ragab.
Nay.
Chair, that's 0-3.
Thank you. The motion fails. I'll put a motion on the floor to decline or dismiss proposed amendment number 5.
Seconded.
I heard Commissioner Ragab as a second, so motion by Battazo, Ragab second. Any discussion? Commissioner Ragab.
Yeah, so it seems like this has been done in response to the Herzl plan, and I would hope if this does get docketed, that's not covered by it, because it seems reactionary there. But it does raise a concerning point, right? If there's a non-residential area that's bounded by the same owner who owns residential parcels, that they could kind of offload some of those non-residential things that are necessary onto the residential zone, those residential zoned parcels. So it kind of almost remove, in my interpretation of it, this can help maintain that kind of buffer. So it seems to meet the criteria, and it seems to be a an interesting situation that's been raised, and perhaps, maybe we should, as a city, take a stance on that for future projects.
Commissioner Murphy, anything to add?
I frankly don't understand it. And I've done land use for 40 years. It seems to me to be a restriction on use, but the use restrictions would be by code and zoning. And so I don't understand this idea of offloading functions on other property because the parent parcel or the adjoining parcel has a COP. So I frankly don't understand what he's trying to do, other than it's, as I think Adam said, it's kind of reactionary to the JCC proposal. I think it's confusing and troubling and difficult, and falls into that category of appears to restrict the city from performing its functions.
Commissioner Raga.
The clarification, my interpretation was it was reactionary not to JCC, but to the Herzl proposal. And
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in response to yours, if a land use attorney of 40 years has trouble studying this or understanding it, maybe it warrants further study. Yeah, but
that could be.
I think that's enough. A sufficient discussion for me.
Yeah.
If no further discussion, the motion on the table is to reject proposed amendment 5 for the docket. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Batazzo.
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy.
Aye.
Commissioner Regeb.
Nay.
2-1, Chair.
The motion passes.
Yes.
And that will not be docketed. Wow, this is a fun game. I really think we're working our brains on this process. I actually want to put a motion on the table to accept proposed amendment 6 for discussion.
Second.
It's been proposed to accept proposed amendment 6 by Batazzo, seconded by Regeb. Discussion really just for recognizing that some issues have been brought up, and it seems like, or it sounds like there's a request for clarification around what is illegal site-specific rezone. I'm reminding myself that this is the beginning of a process where there is legislative review on these issues. And so I want to check in with my commissioners on, is it worth asking the city to put this on the docket and really look at it? Is there more clarity needed on illegal site-specific rezone code? Commissioner Murphy.
The short answer is no. There is 3 defined criteria in the case law of our Supreme Court and courts of appeals that define what is a illegal spot zone. And the reason why trying to refine that further is that the 3rd criteria is that the rezone does not benefit the public welfare of the community. So if you try to define exactly what that is, which I think is what Mr. Goldbach is trying to do, it's a tangled mess, because that's going to be different for everything you look at. And that's why the courts have defined spot zoning in that fashion, because it's a flexible, it's a, shall we say, well-defined flexible standard. But there is a standard out there, and to suggest that there isn't is simply not the case. And so I would strongly urge us not to start trying to redefine what the courts have already defined by the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Thank you. Commissioner Regeb.
Yeah, I was reading about this, and I remember reading about this last year when that same topic came, and yeah, it was interesting trying to find a definition. I remember reading through this one, and you know, the language proposed was interesting. It's like, oh, the morals of the city or whatever. So I was like, where does that come from? There was enough crumbs in that docket proposal. I followed to that case, and then that case referenced another case. So it seems like, you know, it's pulling from some precedent, but Vice Chair Murphy is a land use attorney too, so perhaps there's two conflicting precedents. So I guess I was gonna support it because I saw where that language comes from which court case. But if there's conflicting precedent, I don't think I'm knowledgeable enough to weigh in on this one.
If no further discussion, the motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment 6. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Batazzo,
Nay.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Nay.
Commissioner Regev,
Abstain.
motion fails. 021.
Does that mean that, okay, did you just clarify the motion fails? Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to make some motions? You want me to just keep doing it? All right.
You're doing such a good job.
Thanks. Let's see, we've already addressed proposed amendment 7, proposed amendment 8. We heard public comment, we received public comment. For the sake of discussion, I will make a motion to accept proposed amendment 8 for the docket.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved to accept by Batazzo, seconded by Murphy. Discussion. Commissioner Regev.
I think some valid points were raised. I'm just concerned at the resources thing. Kind of looking forward on some of the things that are identified as moderate, and another one that's low that I'm planning to recommend. So I think it's a great topic to raise, but I'm concerned about resources. So it's my view that number 2 is not met, and hopefully there's time next year.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, I think Adam's concern is valid. I don't know if this is a super high priority, although there seems to be anyone you talk to has experience with this, including myself and people I know. And we had some solid examples in the presentations. Staff has a good point that this may not be appropriate for the land use area. It may be more appropriate in nuisance, but I think that can be sorted out in the process by the city if it reviews this and deals with it. It's the point of the docketing process is for citizens to bring to the city's attention problems that are out there in the real world that perhaps the city council, planning commission are not really totally dialed into as far as solving the problem. And given the nature of this problem and the nature and the manner in which it was presented to us, I think very well, I do think it's something that should be passed through and taken up, and whether it gets taken up right away or down the road, it is something that should be on the docket.
I think I'll just weigh in and say, it sounds like it's an issue that needs some attention. Whether this is the appropriate place for it or not, I don't know. I think it's my hope that if we do recommend it for the docket to the city council, that if the docket and the legislative review process isn't the right place for it, that we find some place to address it or some way to be able to open up those conversations more broadly, because I think I recognize the nuisance nature of the conversations as they arise. If no further discussion, the motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment 8 for the docket. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Patazzo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Regeb,
Aye.
3-0 or passes.
Thank you.
I will move to accept docket item number 9.
Seconded for discussion. Commissioner Regeb.
I mean, I stated my points as a private citizen supporting it, so I don't want to take additional time. I mean, if there's any questions or clarifications, fine, but I'm not going to try to advocate more.
Thank you. Chair Murphy, do you have anything before I go?
Yeah, I sympathize with this immensely because you know, one of the issues is having parking available for disabled people, of which I'm a member of that class. And so I think the concept is very important. And I think it should be worked in, but I think it's premature at this point because it's really targeted primarily at the future, and that is the middle housing legislation that's coming that we'll have to comply with and implement. And so I think this should be dealt with in that context, along with all the other elements that the staff is going to have to deal with, and that this commission and city council will have to deal with. So while I applaud the intent and the goal, I think it needs to be done at the right time, is my view.
I think I would just add, as it relates to proposed amendments around parking generally. So we have a couple of them where we're addressing tonight. And to add to what Vice Chair Murphy said, I really recognize that I think the city is up against some regulations around housing and what comes with that with parking that still are tough and need to be worked through. To the extent that I, as a planning commissioner, want to look at my city staff partners here and just make a statement to council and others that parking is clearly an issue across the island in a variety of ways. I'm not sure that these individual docketing measures are the appropriate way to address it. And I do look to the city and council for some leadership on how we do that. I think the number of individual submissions lends itself to indicating it's an issue. I'm not sure if this is really the place to do it, but I would like to make sure that as we more holistically look at our housing and land use practices, that we're folding in or updating the parking requirements to match accordingly. Adam, did you have one final thing to say before we take a vote?
Yeah, I think, yeah, there is a lot on our plates, and June of next year, this could become a problem. So this is a good way to ensure it doesn't get lost. And yeah, even with that Senate Bill 6015, it allows some of that stuff, some off-street parking to be offloaded onto the street for every 20 linear feet. So this might affect some flag lots. I think it's a good reason. I would argue we should docket it so that we don't get lost in the weeds of all the other housing stuff we need to do in the next 8 months.
Thank you. The motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment number 9 for the 2025 docket. Is it 2025? I just need to make sure I'm saying the right thing. The 2025 docket Raven, can you call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Batazzo,
Nay?
Vice Chair Murphy,
Nay.
Commissioner Rageb.
Aye.
Motion fails 1-2.
Thank you. Motion on the floor to accept proposed amendment number 10.
Second.
Motion has been proposed by Batazzo, seconded by Rageb to accept. Discussion. I'll go since I
ahead.
posed it for discussion. Mr. Thompson has presented a number of code recommended amendments for a number of years now. And while, if I'm honest, I'm trying to be judicious about what we're putting on the list. I'm trying to be judicious. I'm kind of disinclined to recommend all of them, but I think we need to move them through the legislative process and make sure we get a decision about some things. Are we not? We're at 10. I'm scratching my head a little bit about this one. I'm hoping one or the other commissioners might be able to speak into this a little better on their thoughts on this. So we'll start with Mike, Commissioner Murphy, since he started, and then followed by Rageb. Mike.
Okay. This, I believe, as I've said, probably for the past 3 or 4 years, is an amendment in search of a problem. And I frankly don't believe that Dan Thompson understands clear story space. I happen to have a house that has quite a bit of it. And it's 1 story though, so it really doesn't have much of an impact. But it could, and I don't see where this meets criteria for in the promoting the land use, the comp plan. Now Dan has tried to link this to costs of heating and cooling, claiming it'll save 20%, but I'd like to see some statistics on that or some data to back that up. There's also such thing as architectural features in houses, and people should have the right to build a type of house that they want to enjoy and live in. And this contributes really nothing other than being punitive for an architectural feature that really does nothing to harm any of the adjoining properties. So I don't understand why he's consistently pushed this, but he does every year. God bless him for being persistent. But I just don't see any benefit to this in the community as a whole, or consistency with the comp plan, because the comp plan doesn't dictate those types of restrictions on architectural features.
Commissioner Rageb.
I mean, we've heard about massing. I think this reduces it. You have less volume to heat or cool, so that's going to reduce the energy, whether it's a 1-for-1 full 20% reduction. I'm not sure, but it does reduce. So yeah, I think it reduces massing, which allows more light, more view. In a 2-story house, that's 4 feet more view for someone else. Makes sense. It's green. I'm in support of it.
Commissioner Murphy.
Yeah, it really doesn't affect mass, because the mass is dictated by your setbacks and your building heights. And the clear story just has very little to do with massing, and it doesn't give you additional building height. So I don't understand the massing argument.
We have a motion on the table to accept proposed amendment 10 for the 2025 docket. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Patazo,
Nay.
Vice Chair Murphy. You're muted, Vice Chair.
Nay.
Commissioner Regeb. Can you repeat, please?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion fails 1-2.
Thank you. I'm going to put a motion on the table to decline proposed amendment 11 for the
Sec-
2025 docket.
Seconded.
Okay, proposed by Batazzo to decline, seconded by Rageb. Any discussion? Hearing none. Raven, can you call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Patazo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Regeb,
Nay.
0-3, motion fails.
No, nay.
Oh, excuse me.
Whoa. 2-1 pass
2-1
to
passes.
reject.
Thank you. This is teamwork right here. All of us together. So the motion passes. We will not be referring proposed amendment 11 to the docket. Don't worry, I'm keeping notes. I'll summarize it very succinctly when we get to the end, friends. Let me see where I'm at. Oh. Put a motion on the table to decline accepting proposed amendment 12 to the 2025 docket.
Second.
Proposed by Batazzo, seconded by Murphy to decline proposed amendment 12. Any discussion?
I would just make my perennial point that this, again, appears to be a solution in search of a problem. And more importantly, though, for all these, they could be and maybe should be considered in the residential code. And it's true, and in fairness to Dan's points that he's made, he's been pushed off by the delay in the rewrite of that. But it doesn't change the fact that that's where they belong. And that's where because they're not dealing with a pressing issue, they're probably best dealt with in that process.
Adam, do you have anything before I conclude? I will just acknowledge as I was taking notes, I felt like I heard Mr. Thompson indicate that this isn't much of an issue anymore with the change in state law. And if that's the case, then I don't want to cloud up our docket with things that may not necessarily be the issue that they were when they were initially introduced. So with that, Raven, can you please call the roll? The motion on the table is to decline proposed amendment 12 for docketing.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Batazzo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Regeb,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. I'll put a motion on the table to accept proposed amendment 13 for the 2025 docket for discussion.
Second.
So the motion is to accept proposed amendment 13 for the docket, proposed by Batazzo, accepted by Rageb. I proposed it for discussion. I actually, if I'm really honest, and I just want to say it out loud, because we have housing requirements we need to meet on the island, and I don't think we've landed on how we're going to do that, even in single family zones. I'm disinclined to start studying code changes, such as this, prematurely to that. We may need to use ADU requirements as a way to increase housing on the island. And so I don't know if I think it's appropriate for us to one-off it right now. I feel badly kicking this one over and over since it's been continually proposed, but I think that's also where we're at in our process. So I'm actually not inclined to add it to the docket, given where I know we're at as a city looking at these policies, but I did want to put it in for discussion. Either of you have anything to share? Mike, we'll start with you and then Adam.
Yeah, I think Dan even telegraphed that the city council is, has strong feelings about these issues and are dealing with it in the comp plan. And so I think to interject with this is probably inappropriate.
Commissioner Ragged?
I mean, this one makes sense. I think, if you've got a massive house, that ADU is not really gonna house another family, right? That's just a means for getting bonus space. Reducing that threshold makes sense because you have for a functional ADU, you're gonna have, some necessary stairs or a bathroom or a kitchen, and that's gonna eat up at a smaller total area. That's gonna eat up a larger percentage of your available area. So it makes sense to have it for larger houses. I mean, I've looked at some plans of larger houses and it seems like it's a loophole on those larger houses to give you an extra 5%. So I think this is, I'm supportive of docketing this one.
Commissioner Murphy?
Anna makes a good point, and I don't disagree with him. My concern is the 8,400 square feet. I have an 8,000 square foot lot. There really is no room for an ADU after my house is built. And so I'm not sure if that helps us to solve housing issues by limiting ADUs, effectively limiting any incentive for the ADU to lots that small.
The motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment 13 for the 2025 docket. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Batazzo,
Nay?
Vice Chair Murphy,
Nay.
Commissioner Ragged.
Aye.
Motion fails 1-2.
It's kind of like brain teasers every time, isn't it? Is there a motion on the table for 14? Does someone want to put a motion?
Move to accept 14 for docketing.
Second for discussion? Commissioner Ragged, do you want to open discussion at all?
I think we've discussed it a few times. Nothing new here. Yeah.
Okay.
I have nothing to add.
Commissioner Murphy, anything from you?
Nothing new, just, I think we've talked it through on Adam's proposal.
Great. The motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment 14 for the 2025 docket. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair. Thank you. Chair Batazzo,
Nay?
Vice Chair Murphy,
Nay.
Commissioner Ragged.
Aye.
Motion fails 1-2.
Thank you. I'd like to put a motion on the table to accept proposed amendment 15 for the 2025 docket for discussion.
Second.
Motion made by Batazzo, seconded by Murphy. I'll just open and say, this one seems different from 8 because there was that emphasis on solar, which seems different. And I don't know if there's a way to roll this conversation into number 8 in some way, if we can combine them rather than have them be separate analyses. Actually, maybe I should pose that question to city staff.
Yeah, I think if they were both docketed, they would likely be reviewed together. We have the ability from the staff side to combine items for review, and they are very similar, so I think that would most likely make sense.
Okay, so in my mind, I guess, since I believe, accepted proposed amendment 8 for recommending for review, I like to, I think that we should just add the content of 15 in that review and see what the city comes back with. Anybody have any further comments? No? Okay, hearing none. The motion on the table is to accept proposed amendment 15 and combine it with 8. Raven, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Chair Bottazo,
Aye.
Vice Chair Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Reget.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Groovy. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that with all of our acrobatics here tonight, I think I noted that the commission will be recommending proposed amendment 1, proposed amendment 8, and proposed amendment 15. So 3 proposed amendments to the city council for consideration for the docket. Is that accurate by everyone else's math, accounting, and so forth? Okay, groovy. It's exciting. Okay. I think with that, if we don't have anything else here, and thank you, commissioners, for the efficient debate and discussion, let's move on to other business. I think that's Allison's report.
Molly, would you mind pulling that one final slide back up? All right, so I think I mentioned earlier this evening, the city council will be reviewing the docket on November 19th and making final decisions on that. We're intending to cancel the November and December planning commission meetings. At this time, we don't have another item to bring to you, and the staff are pretty much hyper-focused on completing the comprehensive plan review with the city council, and that's taking up the vast majority of our time in the next couple months. Yeah, and the city council is going to be appointing new planning commissioners here shortly, and their service will begin in January. So I think this will be our last meeting with this commission, and I wanted to thank you all for your service on the planning commission over the last year, few years for some of you. It's been great working with you all and great to get to know you. And yeah, thanks for your service to the city. Any questions on all that?
Angie?
Well, I don't have any questions, but I feel like Vice Chair Murphy, if this is your last meeting, I want to just hear from you before we go.
Oh, well,
You're the most long-standing member on this commission with a lot of service and a lot of hours put in. So I think I would actually just like to acknowledge you and give you an opportunity to use the floor for any purpose.
well, thank you. Thank you. Allison, I've appreciated the experience here and the support of staff. You guys have done a very good job in often very difficult circumstances. With a lot of different pressures, and not a ton of resource. So hopefully you will be better resourced in the future, and can move some of these things through more effectively than your limitations have caused to be the case in the past. But otherwise, it's been a fun ride, and interesting ride, and very enlightening about the way certain things work in the city. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anna.
I wasn't expecting to speak or anything.
You don't have to.
I'm kind of caught off guard. Sorry.
Last meeting of the year.
I guess, yeah, that it'll be nice to have a break.
All right.
It's been, good learning opportunity from everyone, and hope to learn more, in the future. Yeah,
I think I would just acknowledge the staff certainly did Deputy City Clerk Deb Estrada for all of her work. Thank you, Raven, for stepping in tonight. And I know that City Clerk Andrea's over there hiding behind the screen. So thank you all to the staff and everyone who continually supports us, helps us with our rules. Good luck with your next planning commission. Thank you everyone who comes to comment. We do, or at least I read your emails, like read the emails. Definitely got a sense of what's going on in the community and appreciate those who actually take the time to participate. That said, if there's no other business to come before this planning commission, then the time is now 8:03 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. As a reminder to commissioners, please stay seated and on screen until staff has terminated the broadcast. Thank you.